Okay, today we are learning Daf Shabbat Daf Kuf. Today's shiur is sponsored by Elizabeth Kirshner in memory of her Babi, Blanche Angel, Bluma Bat Chaya Fega Zichronah Levrcha, for her first year at site. She was a supporter of Torah learning and a regular at many shiurim, and was so proud of Elizabeth's ongoing learning. May our neshama have an aliyah, and may our memory continue to inspire. We're going to start now at the very bottom of Tzadi Tet Amud. Amal Rava. We're talking right now, we're going to jump to a lot of different topics. There's a lot of Mishnayot. We're going to learn 4 different Mishnayot today. And before we get there, we're going to finish up the last part of the previous sugya. We're going to talk about hanacha. In order for someone to be obligated for carrying, one needs to both place an item down into somewhere and remove an item from an area where it's placed. So what is considered hanacha? We're going to see now, what about liquids? And actually what's fun about today is there's a repeat of a bunch of sidyot that we saw in the beginning of the Masechet or at other points. So I've always promised you that we're going to get to things and you'll see them again, and sometimes you might not get them the first time, you'll get them the next time, and we'll get back into also definitions of Rishudei Achiv, Rishudei Arabim, Karmeli, Makom P'tur. We keep reviewing these things, so if you didn't get all the definitions in the beginning, once you see more and more cases, you'll get the hang of it, and it'll stick more. Amar Rava, Pshita li mayim al gavei mayim, hainu hanachatam. If you have a bucket of water, now I want to take some water from that bucket and move it into let's say it's a private domain, I want to move it to a public domain. When I remove the water from the bucket, theoretically, the water is sitting on other water. Now, anything on water is unstable. So is that considered that I'm removing it from a stable place? Because theoretically, the water I take, this is about how you look at water molecules. Those molecules are sitting on other molecules. So do we view it that way? So Rava says, it's obvious to me that mayim al gabei mayim hainu hanachatan. That means that all this water is viewed as one, which means that when I remove it, it's as if, it's obviously the water's in a bucket or something. So it's like I'm taking water out of a bucket. It's not like I'm taking water off of water. But and vice versa, if I'm adding water to it, it would be the same thing. Egoz al gabei mayim. But what if I have a nut that's sitting in water? Now what happens to that nut? That nut is floating. It's not stable. Lav hainu hanachatan. So Rashi makes it very clear, which means v'im natzlu misham lav akirahi. If I take that nut off of the water, that's not considered akira because it's in an unstable area. It's sitting on liquid, and we're not going to consider that an uprooting. And likewise, if I put it down, it's not going to be considered as if I placed it onto something, and therefore you're not going to be obligated. But here comes this question, and we saw this whole sugya earlier in the Masechet. By Rava. Rava asked, this was on Daf Yomi. Egoz bikli ukli tzaf al gabei mayim mahu. Here comes the classic of our question. If you have a nut in a utensil, let's say in a little bowl, so it's solid, it's sitting on that bowl in a stable manner, but the bowl itself is tzaf al gabei mayim. It's like Superman. You've got me, but who's got you, right? You're basically floating here. So that's not in a stable place. Mahu. Mi amrinam batal egoz azlinam v'hanayich. Do we say we go by the nut, and the nut is in a stable area because it's stable inside the kli, even if the kli is unstable? O dilma batar kli azlinam v'halonayich. Or do we follow the kli, since ultimately the nut is actually balanced by the bowl, which is not balanced, not in a balanced area. Therefore, when we say this doesn't count, and it's not going to be akira or hanacha, let's say you put it in or you take it out. So the answer is teku. We don't have an answer. Here comes a good question now. Shemen al gabei yayin. We said that water in a bucket is all considered one unit. What about shemen, oil, on top of wine? We know that what happens, they won't mix. The oil will stay floating at the top. And what's going to happen here? So they say, machloket Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri v'Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri have a machloket about shemen and yayin that are mixed up together, which are not actually mixed. About impurity. Again, we keep getting back to the laws of impurity. The ditnan. Here's the machloket, and we're going to say that whatever they say there is true for what they say here. So now, shemen shetzaf al gabei yayin v'nagat tful yom b'shemen. So do we view this all as one? If a tful yom, someone went to the mikveh in the morning, but didn't yet wait for the sunset, right after the 3 stars come out, then they become pure, but he's still during his day and he's impure. He touches the oil. Now, does he make just the oil impure, or do we look at the whole thing as one substance and he makes all of it? So according to Tanakama, lo pasal ela shemen, only the oil. These are viewed as two separate things. Now let's go back to our case. If you view them as two separate things, then what do you have here? You have oil that's on a liquid. So if you take oil out of there, or you put oil on top of the oil that's sitting on top of the wine, then we're going to say it's not stable. That's not hanacha because it's on wine. But according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Omer, shneim chibur ze lazeh. This is all one liquid. It's true they're not mixing, but it's all liquids. We're going to view this as one item, which means when it comes to impurity, it's all one item. It's all going to be tameh, even the oil, even the wine, I mean. And when it comes to our case, since it's all viewed as one thing and they're all sitting in, let's say, a barrel or whatever it's in, we're going to view that as if it's stable because we view it as all one thing. It's as if it's a bucket of water. If you put water into it, it would be considered that you placed it down in something stable. Therefore, here it would also be considered that you placed it in something stable. I had a thought that it's a little bit different because I guess it's a matter of how you look at that oil. Is it floating or is it, usually it's kind of pretty stable, but I guess that's the question. Maybe even though it looks kind of stable, it's still not 100% stable. And maybe, but to me, it looked a little bit different than our case about being in the kli, in the water. But anyway, it's an interesting comparison. Amar Abaye, bo bereshut harabim amuka sara urechava shmona. Now we're going back to where we finished off yesterday. Yesterday, there was this question Rabbi Yochanan asked. What if you have a bore that's 10 tefachim deep, and then you dump dirt from the side of the pit into the pit from the public domain? As you dump it in, you're basically passing into a private domain, but you're actually canceling out the private domain because as soon as you dump that dirt in, the private domain is no longer going to be a private domain because it's no longer going to be 10 tefachim deep. It's now going to be only 9 tefachim deep, let's say. And at that point, it's no longer rishut yachid. So, Rabbi Yochanan asked that question. He didn't have an answer. If you remember, we didn't have an answer. What if you dump this dirt inside? Abaye now talks about a different case. You have a bor b'reshut harabim, amuka sara rechava shmona. And now it's double the width. Normally, it has to be 4 by 4 to be considered a rishut yachid. Here, it's 8. Okay, so it's double the width, and it has the 10 depth. V'zarach b'tocha machatzelet. You threw in a mat into this bor, chayav. Okay, you're still obligated. Just because you threw in a mat doesn't mean anything. You're obligated. But let's say you threw the mat, and now you'll understand why they gave the example of 8. So you're probably wondering why we jumped from 4 to 8. You could have gone to 5 if you wanted to say something bigger. But in this case, chilkava machatzelet. As you put the machatzelet, this mat inside, you put it standing up, and it divided the space exactly into 2. Now, what happens at this point? If the machatzelet takes up space, so if the whole thing was exactly 8 wide, when you put in that mat as separation, it now separates that pit into 2 spaces, and each of those 2 spaces is now not 4 width because the mat is taking up some of the space. You're now left with less than 4 on either side. So by putting in that mat, you've canceled the rishut yachid. So this is like Rabbi Yochanan's question, or similar. We're going to see why it's a little bit different. But basically, as you put something into the rishut yachid, you actually cancel out the rishut yachid. So comes Abaye and he says, chelkava machatzelet patur. If you do this, you're not obligated for putting the mat inside the bor, because at this point, you're making the bor into regular, it's going to be part of rishut harabim, and you're not, or it's going to be actually, it'll be a makom ptor because it's 10 tefachim. No, it would be a makom ptor because it's 10 tefachim, but not 4 by 4 wide. So you're not going to be obligated. Now we're going to make almost like a kavachomer. Okay, if he thinks that a machatzelet. Now, what's it? If he thinks a machatzelet can divide this space, then obviously he's going to think that the question Rabbi Yochanan asked about throwing dirt will obviously cancel out the depth of the bor. Why? Because a machatzelet will easily come in and out. But if you put dirt at the bottom of that bor, it's likely going to stay at the bottom of that bor. And therefore, since In that case, in the case of the machatzelet, which you might easily take out, and then it'll revert right back to being a reshut yachid, he still thinks you've canceled your reshut yachid, all the more so if you dump dirt inside. Okay, so therefore we're going to have an answer to Rabbi Yochanan's question, at least according to Abai. But le Rabbi Yochanan de mevai le chulia machatzelet pshita le de mavat le mechitzta. But Rabbi Yochanan, who questioned the whole case, if you dump dirt inside, is going to for sure think that in the case of the machatzelet, which you'll easily take in and out, no way is that going to cancel your space. And he would for sure think, now they're making a jump, but they're assuming, the Rabbi Yochanan would assume that in mechitza case, you would definitely be obligated and you wouldn't view that as canceling out your reshut yachid. Another halacha of Abaye about canceling out the height, and this one I think it's going to surprise you. It surprised me, which is Amar Abaye. And as I understand, you put dirt inside, yes, and you put a mechitza inside and you divide it up. That makes sense. But here we're going to have something a little more strange. Amar Abaye. Okay, so you have a classic reshut yachid. Milei mayim. Now it's full of water. Zarak letocha chayav. Okay, if it's full of water, which is usually your typical pit often is full of water, and you throw something in there, you're chayav, because the water obviously doesn't cancel out the height of the bore. But here's the surprise. Milei perot v'zarak letocha patur. But if you fill the bottom of the pit with fruits, and it covers up, let's say, at least a tefach of space, and now it's 9 tefachim, it's already not 10 tefachim deep, and then you throw inside, you're going to be exempt, because it's kind of like throwing dirt inside. Now that seems strange. Why? Because fruits, first of all, you're going to take the fruits out, right? And a lot of the Rishonim ask, what are you talking about? If you're going to take the fruits out, how could they possibly, right? The whole idea of the chuliyah, the dirt, was that it was canceling the bottom of your pit. But here, you're going to take the fruits out. So people try to give different explanations. It's very complicated to figure out. Some people say that we're talking about fruits that you didn't take Trumot Masrot from, which means that since you put them there on, let's say they were put there before Shabbat, you're clearly not going to move them on Shabbat, which means that for the purpose of Shabbat, if they're stuck at the bottom of the pit, they've therefore lessened the space in the pit, which means it's now considered less than 10. Some people say it's items like, wouldn't be, let's say, apples, but it might be something like wheat that you're going to leave there for a long time. I see Tova suggesting, what if you're putting there to make compost? That would be also a good example. If you're leaving there for the long term, it's an excellent case, then it would be considered, again, according to some Mefarshim, the reason is because you're leaving it there for a long time. So there's debates about how exactly to understand this. I'm not even giving you half of the explanations that are brought, but just so you know, there's a big debate about what exactly is going on here and why these are, and they actually compare it to the case of the fig that we throw at the wall, where we say it doesn't cancel out the wall and it's not canceled to the wall because you're going to take it off. Anyway, a bit of a question here about what exactly is going on. Okay, so the question, why is water considered a partition? Water's not a partition. That's the idea. Water's not considered a partition at all. Water's as if it's not there. The other really interesting explanation I saw that I wanted to mention also is that some people say, what's the difference between water and the fruit? The water is see-through. And therefore, you can still see the boundaries, the mechitzot, so to speak, the walls of the pit. Whereas once you have fruit that cover up the bottom, you can no longer see the bottom. So even though you might know how deep it is, you can't see how deep it is. So that's another potential explanation as to why the fruits basically consider it makes the pit less deep. Okay, whereas the water has no effect whatsoever. So now they say, Tanya Namihachi, we're going to bring a braita to prove this. If you throw something from the water, which is a carmelit, we're going to talk about this later today, right? Water we've talked, it's not reshut rabim because people don't generally walk in the water, but it is considered a carmelit, which is reshut rabim de Rabbanan, so to speak. So if you throw from there to the street or from the street to the yam, patur. Rabbi Shimon omer, im yesh b'makom shezarak amok 10 v'rachav 4 chayav. Here's a very interesting halacha, and one can debate whether this is actually comparable or not to the previous case. But what we're trying to prove here is the issue of the water. He says, if you're in the water, if you go into the ocean, sometimes you get to a point where all of a sudden the water, there's all of a sudden like a deep decline, and you all of a sudden go all the way deep down into the water. So what he says is like this. If in the water in general is karmelit, but what he claims is you could have a reshut yachid within the water. If all of a sudden the depths of the water go down to 10 tefachim and you have a space that's 4 tefachim wide, that area, the water doesn't cancel the reshut yachid. Just like the water in a pit doesn't cancel it, the water, and this is a strange comparison because here we're talking about a big sea and all of a sudden there's a dip in the ground underneath. He views that area in the water as a reshut yachid. So if you were to take from there and take something from there into the public domain, you'd be obligated, even though normally from the water you wouldn't be in that specific space. And that shows you that water doesn't cancel a reshut yachid, okay? Even though it's quite different because that's within the water, within a big sea. So it's a little bit of a strange comparison, but it's really in essence saying the same thing. New Mishnah. Hazorek arba amot b'kotel. This is what we quoted in the was it a daf ago or 2 dafim ago? We just quoted this case about throwing it on a wall, right? It was in, I can't remember now, but it was in yesterday's daf. Okay. Hazorek arba amot b'kotel. L'mala me'asara tfachim kizorek ba'avir. We also saw it on Tzadi Vav. If you throw something 10 onto a wall, the wall is 4 amot away from you, and throwing something in reshut or being 4 amot, you're obligated. But we're going to see all sorts of cases today about 4 amot and where it lands and all that, all different kinds of cases. So you throw it 4 amot at the wall. If it's at a part of the wall higher than 10 tefachim, kizorek ba'avir. It's like, okay, you're in the airspace now of reshut or abim above the 10 tefachim. That's called a makom tori or patur. Lamata me'asara tefachim, if it's lower than 10 tefachim, kizorek ba'aretz. It's as if you put it on the ground. Hazorek ba'aretz arba amot chayav. And if you throw something on the ground 4 amot, you're obviously chayav. So now the Gemara asked the question that we saw before, v'halo nach, but it didn't land anywhere, right? In other words, it didn't land on the wall. If you throw it at a wall, what's going to happen? This is basic laws of physics. You throw something on a wall, it's going to fall backwards, right? It's going to bounce off the wall and come back to you, which means that if the wall was 4 amot away, where it lands, which is what's important, is within 4 amot, and you shouldn't be obligated. So Amar Yochanan b'dvela shmeina shaninu. We're talking about a big sticky fig. Okay, shmeina could be fat or it could be fatty, like it's fatty meaning sticky. So what happens? It's stuck to the wall. I put some pictures on the sheet that you can see, okay, of this item sticking onto the wall. Okay, it's the second picture. So the first picture shows how it falls back, bounces back. The second picture shows how it falls on the wall and it gets stuck there. Okay, and that's what we're referring to. Amar Yehuda Amar Rabbi Chia zarak lemala me'asara v'halcha v'nacha b'chor kolshehu. Banu lemachloket Rabbi Meir v'Rabbanan. We have a lot of complicated sugyas today that it's very hard to understand. The Rishonim couldn't understand exactly the reality. I'm going to give you 2 interpretations here. Either, like in my picture, where you have particular aim and it goes right into this hole in the wall. There's a little hole in the wall. What do we know about this hole? And this is where we know something about the hole, but we don't know so much about it. It's at a height. Now, it's lemala me'asara. It's above 10 tefachim, but it falls into this hole. Now, it's higher than 10. The hole itself is not 4 tefachim wide. If it was 4 tefachim wide, we'd have a space that's 10 by 4, and it would be considered a reshut yachid. It would be clearly part of it. The issue here is that now, the way I understood it better was the interpretation that we're not talking about just a little hole here, but we're talking about that the hole is in a space where the height of the hole is more than 10 tefachim, meaning it falls into this hole, but the hole is not just a little hole. It's a space, like a whole big space missing in the wall that has a height of more than 10 tefachim. So now we want to know, do we want to view this space where it fell into, is it its own reshut yachid in and of itself? Because it's in a wall that's in a private domain. The wall is private, but the space itself doesn't have the dimensions of a private domain because the space itself is not 4 tefachim wide. The issue is like this. I have to add one more point that's important to know. We've talked about this before, if you remember. A wall that's maybe a private domain, but it faces a public domain. So we're talking about the part of the wall that faces the public domain. That's obvious because you're throwing it from the public domain. If it were facing inside the private domain, then it's obviously part of the private domain because the only people who use that wall are people in the private domain. But if it's outside, what did we talk about? Remember the person who put his tefillin in the space on the wall, right? There's walls in public domains that people use to put things into. They would put things particularly in holes in walls. They would use them to store items, to put something that they wanted to keep for later. They would use these. So since they would use that space, and since the space is not 4 tefachim wide, which would consider that space, and we think of space as just empty, but for them, space was usable space. But since it's not 4 tefachim wide, it's not necessarily Reshut Yachid. If you remember, we talked about a pillar that's 9 tefachim height in the Reshut HaRabim, and since people would put their bags on it, they would take their bags off their shoulders to kind of fix their bag. So that is a pillar that's usable by Reshut HaRabim, and it's not considered a Makom Torah Carmelit because people use it. So therefore, since they use it, it's considered part of Reshut HaRabim. So the same thing. Is this considered part of Reshut HaRabim or not? And they're going to say it's all based on a machloket, another machloket that we saw before. Banu lemachloket Rabbi Meir v'Rabbanan. L'Rabbi Meir da'amar chokekin lahashlim mechayev. L'Rabbanan da'amar ein chokekin lahashlim lo mechayev. They have a machloket about something else. What's their machloket? A mezuzah. When are you obligated to put up a mezuzah? When you have an entranceway that's 10 tefachim high, 4 tefachim wide. No coincidence, it's the same thing, right? It's the same idea here. These are measurements that we're going to see all across the board. We're going to see it when we get to sukkah. We're going to see it, right? These are the basic architectural measurements that are significant. So you have that space. Okay, you're chayav a mezuzah. What if it's an arch, and the arch at the top is not wide enough? It's not 4 tefachim wide, but at the bottom, it is 4 tefachim wide. So Rabbi Meir and Rabbanan have a machloket. Do we say chokekin lashlim? We imagine as if the arch part was open. Since the bottom is open to 4, we can assume even the arch part at the top is going to be open to 4. And that's called chokekin lashlim. We imagine it as if there's holes. Now, how would you say the same thing here? Since we have this height of 10 tefachim, but we're missing the 4 width, we imagine as if it's open and there's a width of 4 tefachim. Since it's in a wall that's 4 tefachim wide, then we can imagine as if we could open this hole, just like we would open it in the arch, we could open it and say, chokekin lashlim, and then we'd say, this is a Reshut Yachid, and you're obligated for throwing. But if we say, right, ein chokekin lashlim, so that's Rabbi Meir who says chokekin. L'Rabbanan da'amre ein chokekin lashlim, then this is not considered a Reshut Yachid. It's on the side of Reshut HaRabim. We're going to view it as if it's part of Reshut HaRabim and lo mechayev, and you're not going to be obligated because he says it doesn't have the criteria of a Reshut HaYachid. Tani nami hachi, here's a braita to support. Zarak l'mala me'asara v'alcha v'nacha bechor kol shehu. Okay, if you throw something higher than asara, higher than 10, and it fell into a hole, Rabbi Meir mechayev v'chachamim potchim. Here you see, now it doesn't say because of chokekin, but they assume that since Rabbi Meir says you're obligated and the chachamim say you're not, and we already said chokekin or not chokekin, it matches their option. We assume that that must be what their machloket is. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Now we have another issue. Tel hamitlaket. Generally, what do we say a Reshut Yachid is? 10 tefachim high. Now what's the issue here? This is a designated space. You wouldn't, let's say you're walking and you bump into this surface, this structure that's 10 tefachim high. Well, you can't walk anymore, right? You have to stop. What if it's a tail? Okay, a tail is a mound. So you have a mound, a hill that's 10 tefachim high, but obviously the entranceway to the mound is angled. So it all depends on what the angle is, because if the angle is very, very gradual, then it's not like all of a sudden you're at some other, you hit into a wall or you hit into something and it blocks you from walking. Theoretically, you're walking over Reshut HaRabim, you might not even notice the incline. It goes up so gradually that by the time you get to height of 10 tefachim, you really it's kind of like you're just on the ground and it's not really designated as its own space. So the Gemara wants to know what's the angle at which, we'd say obviously if it's straight walls, right, no angle at all, clearly it'll be a Reshut Yachid. So where do we draw the line between literally a line, right? How long is this line going to be? How long is the incline that's going to get us up to 10 tefachim that's going to already be considered as if it's a mechitza? Okay, we're going to view it as if it's a mechitza. So here he says, Tel hamitlaket, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Okay, Rav Yehuda passes down the name of Rav. Tel hamitlaket asara mitoch arba. By the way, it's very confusing. Arba amot, arba tefachim, right? And amma is 6 tefachim, just to give you the difference here. So arba amot is going to be 24 tefachim. So Here, when we say arba, it's amot. This is just simple Hebrew grammar. Arba'ah is tfachim. Okay, so when we say arba, we mean amot. If you're mitlakeh 10 mitoch arba, that means if the incline extends 4 amot until you get to the top, that's going to be an angle. Some people say it's about 25-degree angle. That already we're going to consider it like a mechitza, which means that if zarak v'nachal gabav chayav, if you throw something on top of that tail, you're going to be obligated because we view it as if that's a separate reshut yachid. But if it's, let's say, 5 amot to get to the top, then it's already going to be less steep, right? The more amot it is to get there, the less steep it's going to be. That already is not going to be, you're not going to be obligated. It's not going to be viewed as a private domain. Tanya Namihachi, here's a braita to support this. And here we're going to talk about something else. Mavoy, here's a good intro to Eruvin. What's a mavoy? A mavoy is an alleyway. An alleyway generally comes out of the public domain, leads to an alleyway. That alleyway leads to a bunch of chatzerot, courtyards, and courtyards lead to a bunch of, each courtyard leads to a bunch of houses. That was often how they lived in those days. So again, courtyard is a house with some courtyards, right? They lead to, a few houses lead to one courtyard. A bunch of courtyards lead to an alley. That alley leads to Reshut HaRabim. Now, theoretically, from Torah law, you can pass and you can carry, okay, this is all about carrying now, where you can carry, where you can't. In a public domain, it's forbidden to carry 4 amot. But in a mavoy, already it's not public, it's not Reshut HaRabim, so you can carry there. However, the rabbis forbade it. But if you put up, and this is where we get to an eruv, if you put up what we call a lechi, which is a standing beam right near the entranceway, or a korah, which is a horizontal beam, over the top of the entranceway of the mavoy, then that's considered, okay, there's a debate, is it like we put up a mechitza, okay, and it's basically like a separation, which means you can carry within there, or is it a heker, we're going to get to all this in Eruvin, or is it just some sort of noticeable thing, which we're going to see later today, both these concepts, the same machloket there is going to appear here about mechitza versus heker, just something, it's a noticeable thing just to show people, oh, don't think that you can carry in the Reshut HaRabim. This is different. We're designating as a different space. Then you're allowed to carry. So you need some sort of mechitza. It could be imaginary. It could be symbolic, but some sort of mechitza. So now the Braita says, mavoy sheshaveh letocho. If you have a mavoy that as you go out of the mavoy, the ground is level, but then na'asa midron l'Reshut HaRabim. But then there's this steep decline that gets you into the public domain. Oh, shaveh l'Reshut HaRabim, or Reshut HaRabim is level, v'nasam midron l'tocho, and then you go down this incline to get into the mavoy. Oto mavoy eino tzarich lo lechi v'lo korah. That in and of itself functions as a mechitza, because an incline is basically can function like a mechitza. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel omer, and here we're going to have exactly our case, and that's why they brought this braita. So he says exactly our case. The same thing with the incline. It functions in mechitza as long as it's angled with 4 amot getting to a height of 10 tefachim. Zarat, new Mishnah. Zarat letoch 4 amot. V'nitgalgel chutz la 4 amot. You throw, and it gets to within 4 amot, but then it immediately rolls, and that you haven't passed 4 amot, but then it rolls into 4 amot. Patur, you're exempt. Okay, because you didn't, right? You didn't actually, you threw it within 4 amot, and then it rolled. Wasn't your fault. Wasn't your doing. Chutz la 4 amot, v'nitgalgel letoch 4 amot chayav. But if you threw it 4 amot, this is kind of like a boomerang, and then it came back to you, then you're going to be obligated because it went into Reshut HaRabim. It went into the 4, you passed 4 amot in Reshut HaRabim. So the Gemara is going to ask the exact same structure as last Mishnah. The Gemara asks, v'halo nach. But how could you be obligated in the end if you throw a boomerang? Okay, now maybe a boomerang is different because it was meant to come back to you. But if you throw something and then what happens? Okay, I was thinking outside our shul, we do kiddush in this space, and anyone who's ever been there knows there's this big wind tunnel. And sometimes, right, everything just starts blowing around in circles. So a wind came and just kind of blows it back. It wasn't like a boomerang that you intended. So if you blew it back and it never landed in Reshut HaRabim, why should you be obligated? You threw it into, it went past 4 amot. Sorry, not Reshut HaRabim, but it was in the public. You threw it more than 4 amot, but it came back and it landed within 4 amot. So how could you be obligated? It had to have, when you threw it into the Reshut HaRabim, it had to have landed, so he doesn't say how long, but maybe for a second, on something that was 3 tvachim off the ground. Okay, right? As soon as it's not 3 tvachim off the ground, then it either becomes a makam tor or karmelit or rishut yachid, depending on what it was. But assuming it landed on something that was within 3 tvachim of the ground, then you're obligated. Here's a bright to prove this. This one talks specifically about the wind. And the wind pushed it, right? So you did it chutz la'arba amot, and then the wind pushed it back and brought it back in. Even though ultimately after that it went back out, it doesn't matter because it eventually landed first within 4 amot. But if the wind held it there, this is why I was thinking of that wind tunnel. The wind held it there for a certain amount of time, it sounds like, even though they don't tell you, but it says mashu, even a little bit. Even though it came back in within 4 amot, since it was hanging out there, as if it was landed on somewhere because the wind held it in place, then you're going to be obligated. Rava now comes and says something. The Gemara is going to say, we already said this, so why are you saying it? Amar Rava, toch shlosha l'Rabbanan. Okay, this goes back to something we saw before, not today's daf, but again, either yesterday or the day before. 2 previous dafim are a blur to me which one was which, or maybe even the day before that. But Rav Chilkiah, Bar Tuvi, if you remember, said, there was Rav Hamnuna, and then there was another opinion, and then we have Rav Chilkiah. Was he disagreeing with Rav Hamnuna? He adds this issue about if it's within 3 tvachim of the ground, it's as if it landed on the ground. If you remember, he said that. That's as if it was on the ground because of the laws of Levud. So now, this is according to the rabbis. There was a machlokah, Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis, about kluta k'moshe chadamya. If something goes through the airspace of the Rishut Rabim, there we were throwing something from private to private through the public air, remember? And we said if, Rabbi Akiva says once it goes through the airspace, it's as if it landed. But the rabbis said, no, it's not. Kluta is lav k'mishum chadamya. So according to the rabbis who say that, however, Chilkiah Bar Tuvi said if it's within 3 tvachim of the ground, then it's as if it landed there. Okay, that was what he said. So now comes Rav and he says, toch shlosha l'Rabbanan. When Rav Chilkiah Bar Tuvi says that, he means tzarich hanachal gabe mashu. It's not enough that it just passed through the airspace. It has to have actually landed on something, just like Rabbi Yochanan said. It's the exact same thing. Rabbi Yochanan said if it goes, and it was within the airspace of 3, that's not enough. I'm sorry, if it went outside of 4 amot, right, and then came back, you're going to be obligated if it actually landed there somewhere for a moment, right, very, very momentarily, but even for a second, only if it landed on something. So that's exactly what Rav is saying. So Yatav Ramemar, so Ramemar teaches that law. Ravina says to him, Lav Hainu Matnitin, isn't that exactly our Mishnah? But Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shanacha Gabe Mashu. And that's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan said. So what are you adding that Rabbi Yochanan didn't already say? Amarle mitgalgel ka'amarta. You're comparing, I'm talking about zorek, and you're talking about mitgalgel. There's a difference between something that's rolling and kind of being pushed by the wind to what I'm saying, which is throwing, where when you throw, it just keeps going in the same direction and is clearly going to land, as opposed to mitgalgel, which seems to be rolling in different directions. So he says, mitgalgel en safo lanuach. We don't even know where it's going to end up. Aval hai, kevan de safo lanuach. But this item, since we know it's eventually going to land in the direction that we're sending it, afagav de lonach keman de nachdami. Even though it doesn't land, it's as if it lands. You might have thought, kamash malan, that's why I needed to come and say, it's not, according to the rabbis, kluta kamishum is lav kamishum chadamya. The airspace is not. And even when Rav Chilkiah Bar Tuvi says, if it's within 3 tvachim of the ground, then it is. It's only if it actually touched something that was kind of propped up on the ground or touched the ground at some point within 3 tvachim of the ground, then we view it, even though it didn't land there, then we view it as if it landed there. But not if it didn't land there. If it didn't land there at all, then we're not going to view it that way. Next Mishnah. Hazorek bayam arba amot patur. If you throw something into the water, you're in the water. We talked about you're in Rishut Rabim and you pass an item 4 amot, you're obligated. What about a karmelit? Karmelit is something we said. It's a Rishut Rabim de Rabbanan. So 4 amot, you'd be obligated, but you're only obligated by rabbinic law. So if you pass an item, you're in the sea, and you pass an item, you carry it 4 amot, you're not obligated by Torah law, you're obligated by rabbinic law. Im haya rekak mayim. What if there's a puddle? in the middle of Rishut Harabim. So now, right, what's the status of this puddle? This is going to be kind of interesting. How do we view puddles? Do we step in puddles? Do we not step in puddles? We actually saw this also. If there was a rakak mayim, and the public domain passes through, it's really that the puddle's in the middle of the public domain. If you throw something 4 amot in Rishut Harabim and it lands in this puddle, you're obligated because it's considered part of the public domain. V'kamahu rakak mayim. How deep is this rakak that we're going to consider it? How deep is the puddle that we're going to consider it part of Rishut Harabim? Obviously, pachot me'asara tefachim. Right? Once it's 10 tefachim deep, then already it's going to be its own reshut. But if it's not 10 tefachim deep, we're going to assume this puddle is just a regular part of Rishut Harabim. It's kind of batel, canceled to it. Now we have a very, very strange line in the Mishnah. Rakak mayim u'Rishut Harabim v'halechet bo hazorek b'tocho 4 amot chayav. If you have a puddle and the private domain, the public domain is going through that puddle, if you throw into it 4 amot, you're obligated. Why is this very strange? We just said this a minute ago, less than a minute ago. That was exactly what. So they repeat this line entirely. So the Gemara is going to obviously ask, what's happening here? So a certain rabbi says to Rabbi, I understand why they use the words Rishut Harabim mehalechet bo, okay, that the path goes through it, and they repeated that wording twice. They repeated it. Why did they repeat it? They wanted to teach you something that you might not have known. They want to teach you hakamashman hiluch al yedei hadchak shmei hiluch. Even if it's uncomfortable to walk through there. Imagine a puddle in the street. Most people try to avoid puddles. It's not exactly the most comfortable way to walk. That's still considered walking. Okay, so that's considered like part of Rishut Harabim. But tashmish al yedei hadchak nevet. The first time is to tell you that that's considered hiluch. The second time is to tell you only hiluch al yedei adchak is hiluch, but tashmish al yedei adchak lo shmei tashmish. What does this mean? We already talked about this. You have a pit 9 tefachim deep, right? If you have a puddle 9 tefachim deep, what do we say? That's just part of Rishut Harabim. But if you have a ditch, a pit that's 9 tefachim deep, right? Depending on if it's 4 wide, then it's called a karmeli. If it's less than 4 wide, it's called a makom ptur, an exempt space. And then you can actually carry there by Torah law, even makom ptur, you can carry there by rabbinic law. If it's karmeli, then you can't. But what is this? This pit, theoretically, you could use. If you're in Rishut Harabim, this goes back to what we said about taking off your bag, right? Theoretically, if you wanted to store something in the pit, you could. You could put something to store, but imagine if it's 10 tefachim deep and you want to store something, it's not so comfortable. You'd have to bend down and lean over and put it all the way at the bottom. Not very comfortable. That's called tashmish al yedei adchak. That's not considered tashmish. That's not going to be canceled out, meaning it's not going to be considered part of Rishut Harabim because it has a shimush by Rishut Harabim. It's useful, but not super useful. People wouldn't really use it. But hiluch al yedei adchak, like going into a deep puddle, that is considered part of the Rishut Harabim. Okay, and it won't be considered a karmelit or a makom ptur. Okay, so now they understand, therefore, hiluch, why it's repeated. Ella rakak chezim ne'elam ali. But why do we have this rakak mentioned twice? So the Gemara answers, one is to tell you in the summer months, and one is to tell you in the winter months. We also saw this before. Now we're going to have 3 different reasons as to why we need to say that. Utsricha, you need it one. Di'itana chade, if you only have one, havamina hanimili b'imor hachama, we'd assume it's part of the Rishut Harabim in the summer months. Why? Because in the summer months, people like to go through puddles. People like to cool off, so they're happy to run in a puddle. But who wants to go in a puddle in the middle of the winter? But you could actually use the reverse logic. In the winter, because his shoes are filthy anyway, he doesn't really care to go in a puddle. But in the summer, everybody's shoes are very clean. There's no muddy ground anywhere. Imagine, right? This is when it's all muddy all the time. Think about camp in the summer in America, where it was always raining, and your shoes were always dirty. But when you're always dirty, you don't really care. Okay, but in those days, it was in the winter when everything was dirty and rainy. In the summer, it didn't rain. You might have a puddle because someone dumped their water there, but you wouldn't have a puddle from rain. So you might say, no, people don't walk through there because they don't want to ruin their shoes. That's one explanation. Abaye amar itzrich, salkadat achamina You might have thought that the first puddle would be only if it doesn't have 4 amot. But if you have a huge puddle, what are people going to do with a really long puddle? People are going to walk around it. You don't want to go. People don't mind. Okay, I'm going to step a little bit in the puddle, but they don't want to go. They don't want to go through a huge puddle and really walk through. So maybe they would go around. Again, it comes to teach you, no, even a huge puddle is still considered Rishut Rabim. The whole idea is if people don't walk through it, then it's going to be considered its own space and not part of the public domain. What comes to teach you, no, if even that is still considered, because many others would actually walk through it. Rav Ashi Amar Itzrich, Zakadat Tachamina Hanimile Hechidahave Arba. Now we're Arba'ah. Now we're back to Tfachim. You might have thought that's only when it's 4 Tfachim. Aval Hechanya. You might walk through a puddle if it's a little bit big, but it's all a matter of size and relative. Aval, and you could use the same logic, the opposite. Aval Hechidelo Have Arba'ah, Mifse Pasele. If it's less than 4 Tfachim, you can easily jump over it. So because you can easily jump over it, well then people don't go in the puddle. So you might have thought that's going to be considered its own reshut. And therefore, they needed to tell you both. But as the Rav Ashi the Tameh, he goes according to his own shita. The Amar Rav Ashi says something similar elsewhere. Haiman dezarik benach aguda de gamla. Gamla is not a gamal. It's a bridge. It's not a camel. If you have, now we're talking about a beam. The bridge was made up of beams, right? We've walked on those kind of bridges. It's rickety bridges. If there's a piece that's not hammered in well, or if there's a piece that's different from all the others somehow, maybe people will pass over that and they won't actually walk directly on it. So you might think, in that case, maybe if you threw something on that, maybe that wouldn't be considered part of the gesher. And the gesher, we're talking about a bridge that's 16 amot wide. It's very big and it's considered Rishut Rabim. So you might have thought that one beam people don't walk on, it's not Rishut Rabim. Comes from Ashi and he says, no, you're chayav sharei rabim bokimbo. Even though some people are careful not to step on it, many other people just walk on it and they're not concerned, and therefore it's considered part of the bridge. Likewise in our case. Okay, last part for today. New Mishnah hazorek minayam liyavashal minayavashal layam minayam l'sfina minasfina layam. If you throw from the land to the water or the water to the land, this is again, the water is a carmelite. So you're not going to be obligated by Torah law. Uminayam l'sfina, if you're in a boat, which is a reshut yachid, a private domain, and you throw to the water or the reverse. Umina sfina l'chaverta, or from one boat to another. We're going to have to see later what kind of boats and who owns the boats, etc. Patur. Sfinot kshurot zo bazo. If you have 2 boats attached to each other, mitaltalim mizo lezo. Imenam kshurot, but if they're not attached to each other, afa pisha mukafot, ein mitaltalim mizo lezo. Again, we'll understand this case more when we get to the Gemara. I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to skip now to the Gemara. Itmar, sfina. You have a boat. What's the issue? The boat is a reshut yachid. The water is a carmelite. According to the Mishnah, it's patur. But patur means you're exempt, but by rabbinic law, it's forbidden. Now, when you're in a boat, generally, what do people do? They would take water from, imagine you're in a sea of fresh water. They would take the water and use it for drinking, for washing, for all sorts of purposes. So how are you going to get water on the boat on Shabbat? Sfina, because it's asur midrabanan. Rav Huna amar motzi'in min aziz kol shehu umimale. You need, this is what I said, we're going to get back to the difference between a heker, something noticeable, or a actual mechitza. So he says you just put out some sort of protrusion, it doesn't matter how big it is, and that allows you to draw the water up into the boat. There's a big debate, does it mean only where the protrusion is, or can it be on any part of the boat? There's a big debate about this. Sounds like if it's just a heker, really it could be even farther from that space. So you need a heker. You make a little 4x4. Okay, you take some beams of wood, you make a 4x4 area, you hang it out on the side of the boat, and we say it's called good achit mechitza. This means we have imaginary mechitzot. It's like your beam that goes across the mavoy. It's as if it goes down. Likewise here, it's as if the mechitzot go all the way down. You've created a reshut yachid, and you can now draw water through that. There's a big debate. Does it have to be that there's walls, 10 tefachim? Doesn't have to go down to the water, but they have to be 10 tefachim to have actual mechitzas, and then they can go down. Some people say even because you're on a boat, we allow you, because it's going to be very hard to hang something off your boat that has mechitzot that are 10 tefachim long, so we allow you a special heter to just make it kind of these beams that don't actually go long, as long as they're 4x4 wide. Okay, so there's a big debate again about how that is. This is one of these dapim where a lot of debates about what exactly the pshat of the Gemara is. Rav Huna Amar Motziem and Aziz Kol Shu Mimale Kasavar Karmelit Me'ar Mashchinan. He views, now here the big thing is, where do we count the Karmelit from the ground? A Karmelit is like a Rashid Rabim that above 10 Tfachim, it's already a Makom Tor, it's an exempt space. So if you count the Karmelit from the bottom, the dirt at the bottom of the water, then Avira Makom Torhu, the whole airspace that we're talking about above the water is already a Makom Tor because the water is obviously going to be 10 Tfachim deep, certainly where your boat is. Ubedinu disease nami loli bayin. You don't even really need a ziz because you're really carrying from a makom tor. But we want you to have some sort of hekera so that people don't think you could carry from a rishud yachid to a karmelit. You make a space of 4 and you fill in. Then you take the water through that. Why? Karmelit misvat yama mashchina. We count it from the top of the water. That's where the height counts from. It's only 10 tefachim above the top of the water. And therefore, Maya Arasmichta, and the water is considered like the ground. It's as if it's attached to the ground and part of the ground. It's kind of like where we started, when you have water in something. So we view the water as part of the ground. Therefore, you're going to end up being carrying from your karmelit because the top of the water is a karmelit, not a makom tor. So Amalei Rav Nachman l'Rabbi Ravua l'Rav Huna. Amalei Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, L'Rabbi Ravua u'Rav Huna da'amar motziam en aziz kol shum emalei zimnin delecha asara v'kametaltel mikarmelit l'rishud yachid. So he says to Rabbi Bar, Amalei. Okay, I didn't read that right. Let's go back. Amalei Rav Nachman l'Rabbi Bar Ravua. He says to Rabbi Ravua, the one who disagrees with Rav Huna, he says to him, Rav Huna, according to Rav Huna, who says motziam en aziz kol shum emalei. I said before, obviously it's going to be 10 tefachim deep off the ground. But he says not necessarily. What if you're in a space that's less? You could be in shallow waters. What do you mean? A boat deep, right? A boat at the bottom goes down under. It's going to go. You can't take a boat in such narrow, shallow waters. But there's the tip of the boat. The tip of the boat goes up and it's not under the ground. And theoretically, that part could be within 10 tefachim. Obviously, they're going to say, Amrav Safra Gishushe Azle Kama. But if that part gets in, the rest of the boat's going to get in. That's dangerous. So there's people who make sure that they stand there prodding with a stick under the water so that the boat doesn't ever get into those shallow waters. And that answers his question. Last issue for today. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak l'Rav Chia bar Advin. L'Rav Chistu l'Rav bar Rav Huna da'amrei osem makom arba'ah u'memalei shofchin di dehechi shadi lehu. If you say you make this 4x4 space, how are you going to get rid of dirty waters? You're not going to throw your dirty waters. If you want to say through that 4x4 space you made. Why? Because you're not going to want to throw it there because that's where you draw your water from. You're not going to throw your dirty water right where you draw your fresh water. So what do they say? They poured it on the side of the boat where it goes down the side of the boat and only then. So kind of like you're throwing it into your private domain, and only from there it gets to the water. So they say, but that's a cop-out answer. But how did the water get to the karmelit ultimately? Because you threw it there. It's true, it traveled by the private space, but in the end, it was and this is like the big question, right? It's your koach, your strength that got it there. So what did they answer? An interesting answer, and with this we'll deal with more tomorrow. Kocho b'karmelit lo gazru. Since karmelit's only d'Rabbanan, and kocho is already indirect, then we say kocho, by the way, comes up a lot in dinei nezikin. If I throw an arrow and I shoot it and it hits you, well, I say, I didn't touch you, my arrow touched you. But what do you mean? Your arrow came from your koch. You're the one who shot the arrow. So kocho is an issue in nezikin. You're obligated. Here they say, since karmelit's only d'Rabbanan, and since it only was indirect, we're going to allow indirect. That's okay. And therefore, that must be how you do it. And now we're going to try to understand this better tomorrow. We'll pick up from here at the bottom of the daf tomorrow.
Thank you.